Hi there, counselors. You want to talk business or you want to play house? Let's just have some fun with another episode of the top 10 favorite and, from what I believe, are the best performances by some of the greatest actors in classic cinema. You took the words right out of my mouth. We're starting from 10 and then smoking our way up to number 1, and you got it, baby. I have seen every film that is attainable of these artists, so all these lists come from true and passionate accuracy. Boy, I got a story planned for you this season of October, as we talk about one of the greatest, most iconic movie stars and gut-punching actors of classic cinema. Robert Mitchum. Born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, Mitchum was definitely, to put it lovingly, a wild child, playing pranks, constantly fighting, which led him getting expelled from both middle and high school. He ran away from home when he was an early teen, hopping freight trains, performing odd jobs, amateur boxing, and later at one point, arrested in Georgia and worked on a frickin' chain gang. He apparently escaped and ran back to his family in Delaware, all before he was 16 years old. His sister Julie was big in the arts, so she moved out to LA to perform, and Bob, with his brother, later joined her, where he eventually wrote monologues and song lyrics for her. Surprisingly enough, if you guys didn't know this, Robert Mitchum was actually a really skilled musician, knowing to play the saxophone, writing musical lyrics, and later on in life, developing some musical albums. Kinda crazy, right? He performed with a theater group locally in LA, but decided to put that to the side when he married his sweetheart Dorothy and had children. He worked as a machine operator in World War II, but after a nervous breakdown, he was influenced to go back to the arts. And after a whole string of uncredited roles, leading to his credit as Bob Mitchum, slowly but surely, he was going to become a popular name when it came to the pictures. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you right now, this is one of the most difficult videos and lists to compile for an artist, simply because Robert Mitchum, he's literally one of my favorite actors ever. Every time he is on screen, he is unbelievably captivating and simply real. When I first saw him as a kid, he gave me a whole new definition of cool. As my education of his filmography progressed over the years, I couldn't believe how much of a true professional he actually kind of was. He wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong. I mean, there have been some cases where he showed up on set high or even drunk. We can say is that his own way of method acting? You be the judge. But Mitchum was notorious for acting like he didn't give a damn. Robert Osborne, the legendary host of TCM, one of my favorite people ever, has said his interview with Mitchum was almost annoying because he wouldn't go in depth about his acting process, because he held this persona of a man's man. I mean, he held that very strongly. But obviously, after reading more and more about him, he truthfully cared so much for the profession. It's not that he didn't give a damn, it's that he didn't overthink it. I love how he puts it, and I quote, "This isn't a tough job. You read a script, if you like it, and the money is okay, you do it. You remember your lines, show up on time, hit your marks, do what the director tells you to do. When you finish, you rest, and move on to the next part. That's it." I would have loved to have seen him on an episode of Inside the Actor's Studio, just to see how he would handle all those questions from James Lipton. His career has been so vast and deep with epic performances that every performance he gave was just so magnetic. Robert Mitchum is on another level as far as a classic leading man. He had the exterior of danger, but the interior of the beautiful truth. Howard Hawks one time shouted at him, "You are such a fraud, because you act like you don't care, but you really do care." And then Bob Mitchum replied, "Don't tell anyone." Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited now to share the top 10 best performances by the underrated and cool Robert Mitchum. Starting off at number 10, we have El Dorado. Yeah, I know, it's probably very surprising for everyone who are true Mitchum fans. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a great film, even though it's a loose remake of Rio Bravo. But of all the performances in westerns Mitchum has done, this is honestly the best I've seen him in, and the whole beginning of his career was made of westerns. I consider it his best performance in a Western because of the type of character he plays. A worn-down sheriff who is beating himself up on the bottle, with a crutch to beat. This requires a great amount of character work, and he really does give his best, as usual, even though he's got some continuity errors of his leg, which apparently were intentional. He and the Duke spent a lot of time on their trailers having a blast with Jimmy Kahn, which is swell, but man, he is very effective, but also really hysterical as the sheriff who needs help against the outlaws. It's a fun little Western that I truly admire Mitchum for. Number 9, Home from the Hill. Directed by Vincente Minnelli, this truly is a tour de force performance for Mitchum. Based on the novel, Mitchum plays the rich and powerful Captain Wade Honeycutt, who has been a poor example of a husband and father with his womanizing and drinking, and just plain abuse. When his son becomes old enough to hunt, he decides to teach him about business and to hunt, but his son rebels over a new love. On top of that, Mitchum has George Peppard claiming he's his birth father. At 2.5 hours long, it is indeed epic, and it did pretty well financially when it premiered. I think it's very much underrated because you see Mitchum with the masculine stance, as he always does, but we yearn to see the sensitivity that we have seen from his other characters before, and when we do see it, it is truly heartbreaking and moving. Number 8, Ryan's Daughter. A beautiful film, honestly, directed by the master himself, David Leigh, with Mitchum starring as a school teacher, Charles, who falls in love with Rosie. They get married, but as time goes on, she ends up falling for a very troubled British officer, as the backdrop of World War I leads to the historical Easter Rising. This is another one of those troubled films that deserves to be re-examined because Mitchum is just heartbreaking here, and his accent work is pretty damn good. Set in a small Irish village and filmed on location in County Clare, Ireland, everyone went through a tough shoot. So tough that Mitchum was kind enough to grow weed at the garden of his hotel for the cast and crew. How nice. Apparently, Mitchum and David Leigh didn't really get along, since Leigh was indeed a perfectionist, and Mitchum is like a 1 to 2 take kind of a guy. But hey, artistry will teach you a lot of things, and you can see different layers in Mitchum here, not seen in a lot of films. Mitchum, of course, would go on years later and say David Leigh was one of the best directors he's ever worked with. I could go on about the trouble this picture endured, but I'll save that for another video. What matters here is Mitchum's beautiful portrayal, that he himself thought it was one of his personal best, and I'm right there with you, Mitch. Number 7, The Sundaners. Another epic film, this time directed by Fred Zinnemann, with Mitchum this time doing an Australian accent. And once again, wonderfully, I might add. He plays Paddy, the patriarch of the Carmody family, a sheep-driving family, who are, shall we say, not in vertical alignment on what they want their future to be. Mitchum was more than happy to work with his dear friend Deborah Kerr again, and though it's not an amazing film, it's definitely slow in some parts. There are still excellent moments between Mitchum and Kerr that make it worthwhile. Paddy is a charming, hard-working, drifting gambler. A stretch for Mitchum to play, right? But he's just so good at it. And the scene towards the end, I've talked about this before, when Ida, played by Kerr, has saved up all their money to buy a home, and Mitchum gambles it all away, so he has to return to his wife and confess. The confession scene is a very heartbreaking moment because we see the disappointment in Kerr, but also the guilt and shame from Mitchum. It's such a great and moving performance that matches Kerr's Academy Award nominated performance for sure. Number 6, Out of the Past. I really wish this could be much higher because it deserves to be. Markham is a gas station owner, but has a mysterious past as an investigator, which comes knocking on his door and affecting his whole new life. Co-star Jane Greer has said Mitchum wouldn't be caught acting here, and acting alongside the great up-and-coming rock star actor Kirk Douglas, not sure if you heard of him, he surely doesn't. Mitchum wasn't intimidated at all by Douglas's intensity, and in fact it really helped shape Douglas's character. I do have to say, Jane Greer almost owns this movie. She is so damn good in this. But of course, an actor is only as strong as their scene partner. And Mitchum is just perfect. He underplays a lot of the intense moments as Jeff, which makes his scene partners better. And he is just too cool for school. I'll be honest, his swagger, his way of looking at you, taught me a lot when I was young and trying to take girls out. The finale is just so crazy. You think, really? Did that just happen? Unbelievable. Out of the Past is without a doubt a classic that should always be preserved in film noir history. Number 5, the story of G.I. Joe. I shall say it again. This should be much, much higher for Mitchum. Honestly, it should. Would you believe that his performance as Lieutenant and Captain Walker is his only Academy Award nominated performance for Best Supporting Actor? I still can't believe it. Based on the true journaling of Pulitzer Prize-winning war correspondent Ernie Pyle, this riveting journey is told from the eyes of Pyle, played beautifully by Burgess Meredith, as he accompanies the C Company, 18th Infantry, through Italy. The film takes a few dramatic liberties, as all of them do, but a lot of coverage of actual infantries were used in this film, of course, which gives it a look of a documentary. Mitchum's character, Lieutenant Walker, was based on 2 real-life soldiers Pyle knew, Captain Henry T. Waskow and Sergeant Frank Ebersol, both men who deeply impressed Pyle with their courage, transparency, vulnerability, righteousness, and leadership. Mitchum captures that just beautifully. I love that intimate scene he has with Meredith in their base camp, writing a letter to the bereaved of deceased soldiers. If only there was something we could do with all these men. It just shows us such a vulnerable side of a man, caught up in leading his team, missing home, and what is right and wrong. There are so many things going on that maybe a lot don't catch at first, but after multiple viewings, which are definitely worth it, you see it very presently. The finale as well, which was almost directly reenacted from Pyle's own article, The Death of Waskow, is so beautiful. Director William Wellman really knocked it out with this one. But this movie wouldn't be as great if it weren't for Mitchum's brave and towering performance, which really catapulted him to being a movie star. Number 4, Heaven Knows Mr. Allison. Technically Mitchum's first pairing with Deborah Kerr, directed by master storyteller John Huston. I covered this one also on Deborah Kerr's video, and so I guess I'll just repeat myself. This is certainly a lovely and effective story of an Irish nun and an American Marine trapped on an island in the South Pacific during World War II, and they do everything they can to survive and find rescue. While doing so, they develop a close and understanding relationship. A great character study that I didn't really appreciate when I first saw it, but after multiple viewings, it's easy to understand why this film was Mitchum's personal favorite role he's ever given. I mean, he said that a lot for a lot of films, but he was very adamant about this one. I think it's because he was worried about working with Deborah Kerr, since this was their very first pairing together, and how proper she appeared to be, of course, until she swore at John Huston one day, bringing he and Mitchum to tears of laughter. One of the most fun sets, apparently, because of Mitchum and Kerr. Their chemistry together is just dynamic. They work so well together. We see these two combat and annoy each other to truly enjoying each other, learning from each other, but then leading to despair for their situation. This is often compared to The African Queen, also made by Huston, and yeah, you can see so many elements in many other Castaway films. And this one certainly isn't a masterpiece, but Mitchum's sensitivity here as a hard-fighting Marine, having to just adjust himself with a nun, is such a great role in such great conflict and such a great opportunity as an actor. Mitchum clearly understands Allison, that we feel for him so much. I honestly wish he was nominated for this because he was certainly worthy of it. Number 3, Cape Fear. You know what I'm going to say, aren't you? Yep, third time's a charm. This should be much, much higher because my God, his performance as Max Cady is one of the most terrifying and most memorable performances ever given by him, hands down. His performance is also still on AFI's top 100 villains on film, and rightfully so. You must know the story, right? Okay, Max Cady's lawyer, played by Gregory Peck, goes against his job and doesn't actually help Cady getting out of jail, and in fact helps convict him. Years later, Cady is released and seeks vengeance on Peck and his family. Every single scene he is in, he is just so damn chilling. This is one of those villainous performances where if only the Academy would have recognized. Mitchum apparently didn't want to do it, but he took the role after director J. Lee Thompson delivered a case of bourbon to his home. Mitchum replying back, "Okay, I drink your bourbon. I'm drunk. I'll do it." And thank God he did, because the studio was looking at Rod Steiger, Ernest Borgnine, and Telly Savalas, who ended up playing Charlie, the private eye here, and there's nobody but Mitchum that could give the grimace and cadence of Cady. One particular terrifying sequence is with Polly Bergen, who plays Gregory Peck's wife. You remember that? Oh, God. What he does with the eggs, and then ramming her through the doors and forcing himself on her, which was not supposed to happen. Those doors were supposed to be unlocked, but an AD accidentally locked them, which caused Mitchum to push Polly through them, causing many bruises and a bloody back. They were so caught up in the scene that when the director yelled cut, he had to yell cut so many times, and it came to a point where the crew members had to stop Mitchum. Once he came to, he caressed Polly, apologizing like crazy over and over. He was so broken up about that moment. Even though he looked at acting as just a job, a real actor can really get inside the skin of characters and have moments like that, which is truly mesmerizing and scary at the same time. His speech about the plumber that his wife is seeing now. "When I was in the bucket, I wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill him with my bare hands." Oh, he's so damn chilling. The cut of this film was longer, and Mitchum's performance had even more to it. But of course, this was Peck's production company, so you gotta have more Peck than Mitch. I'm just kidding, I like Peck, but Mitchum, of course, steals every scene. But hey, at least they reunited for Scorsese's remake. Not having scenes together, but it's nice seeing them there. Side note, I of course prefer the ending in the remake than the original. Max Cady needed to go, man. Number 2, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. I don't know if this is surprising to everyone, but if it is, I urge you very much to take another look at this underground classic. Mitchum plays the man himself, Eddie Coyle, who is working with the police to bring down his gangster cohorts in order to get him out of more jail time, which he simply cannot do. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how mesmerizing this film is, thanks to Peter Yates' realistic direction, but more so, Mitchum's simple but confident, tragic performance as Eddie. Honest to God, even though Eddie Coyle is a degenerate mob guy, I felt for him deeply of wanting out of the business and getting away from Boston. And again, Mitchum's Boston accent was fantastic. Not perfect, but fantastic. He got to know 4 local Southeast Stadies in order to perfect it. The progression of how he has to work with Richard Jordan, the undercover cop, to get more evidence, and every time that they meet, Jordan will say that, "I'll give you more jail time if you give me more evidence. I'll give you more if you give me more, if you give me more." And then every time Mitchum risks his frickin' life to get more and gives it to him, Jordan says, "Oh, there's nothing I can do for you yet." You're just like, oh my God. He just looks beaten every time in those diner scenes. And you just empathize with the guy, because we see from how much he wants a better life for himself. It's heartbreaking. Man, it's tough to see, especially given Mitchum's reputation as a tough guy. This was very much a different role compared to his other more popular roles, which thank God he did this film. I just remember first catching this film on TCM when I was a kid, and I couldn't believe the underplayed power in this ensemble. Once again, I think Robert Mitchum should have been widely recognized when award season came around. But hey, who needs an award when the legend speaks louder and is worth more? All right, folks, here are some honorable mentions. Farewell, my lovely. Mitchum's first tackle at Raymond Chandler's classic protagonist, Philip Marlowe, based on Chandler's book, which was originally adapted into the film Murder My Sweet, with Dick Powell as Marlowe. Mitchum was in his late 50s here as Marlowe, which is quite the stretch. I mean, I'll say this, guys. He's not my favorite Marlowe, personally. But I do love him as Marlowe, and he is led by Moose Malloy to track down Velma, his seedy nightclub dancing girlfriend. I like this adaptation, mainly because Philip Marlowe is a role that just has Mitchum written all over it. Scrooged. Yeah, this is probably very surprising. But it's honorable because technically, ladies and gentlemen, this was the very first film I ever saw Robert Mitchum in. The classic Bill Murray Christmas Carol with Mitchum playing his boss. There are quite a great number of comedic moments from Mitchum, such as the restaurant scene where Murray is seeing things and Mitchum is just in mid-sip, frozen, and his eyes shooting back and forth between John Glover and Murray. It's great. Or how about when he's on the phone to the studio booth towards the end, when Bill Murray is interrupting his own Christmas Carol special, shouting at the TV screen, "They're paying your salary, you ass!" I love it. Man, why didn't we get Mitchum as Scrooge one time? Just one time. Thunder Road, another underground classic starring Mitchum as Luke Doolin, who returns home to Tennessee from the Korean War and takes over the family moonshining business, and doing everything he can to protect his brother from joining, as gangsters and the cops are after him. It's amazing how much of a family film this is, in the context that, literally, Mitchum's family is in this film. Yep, Robin Doolin is actually played by Bob Mitchum's son, James. His son playing his brother. Kind of wild, huh? But not only giving a fantastically slick performance as Luke, Mitchum also co-wrote the story, and he wrote his own music, quintessentially The Ballad of Thunder Road, which actually reached number 69 on the Billboard charts. The Grass is Greener, the greatest foray of romantic comedy for Mitchum. Nothing like a love triangle between Cary Grant, Deborah Kerr, and Mitchum, with an extra flavor from Gene Simmons. Kerr and Mitchum in their third collab out of 4 together. And you know what? Same for Grant and Kerr. Their third collaboration as well, which is so fun. You don't see Mitchum intentionally do a lot of romantic comedies, a lot of romantic dramas. But Mitchum? Was he funny? Hell yes, he was. Oh my God, he's a riot. And with Grant? Oh God, he knocks it out of the park here. The Longest Day. Another fantastic epic war film with stars and cameos a go-go. One segment, including Mitchum as a brigadier general, leading his men to battle. Mitchum once again is so strong, commanding in these action scenes, but also carries the poetic beauty of a man caught in war and is just doing his job as much as he really hates it. A real Hollywoodized take on D-Day for sure. A lot of inaccurate liberties, sure. But the moments with Mitchum, man, are they so real and phenomenal. Number 1. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, The Night of the Hunter. Sadly, Charles Laughton's only cinematic directorial effort, and both hands with LOVE and HATE down. This is Mitchum's most defining performance. He plays Reverend Harry Powell, who is not a real preacher, but a horrible criminal posing as a reverend in order to obtain money, which is hidden inside his previous cellmate's home. Turns out he has to terrorize Shelley Winters and his 2 new stepchildren in the process. No problem for Mitchum. Based on the novel by Davis Grubb, but heavily rewritten by Laughton, this film is unbelievably terrifying to this day, with its dark tones, its frightening score, and of course, Mitchum, just tearing it up as one of the great boogeymen of classic cinema. The speech of LOVE and HATE is definitely linked to Spike Lee's masterpiece, Do the Right Thing, which I love. I love it so much. And the power of Mitchum is just the best it ever is. There are times where I feel like Mitchum is kind of going over the top here, but no, he is just simply sublime, spooky, charming, sophisticated, and just plain frickin' scary. It was a risky move for Mitchum to take a role like this because of how dark and diabolical he is. But Mitchum was so instrumental in the filmmaking process, which is how Lawton really became impressed with Mitchum as an artist. The film, obviously and unfortunately, was such a critical failure when it came out, which is why Lawton never directed film again, but obviously has gained a great cult following and holds up amazingly today. It truly was ahead of its time, with Mitchum. Oh my God. The man doesn't act scary. He just is. Which is also why AFI, again, puts his performance as one of the top 100 greatest villains in cinema. Not to mention, years and years later, Mitchum would call this performance of his personal best. You know, Charles Lawton called Mitchum one of the greatest actors he's ever worked with, and he said Mitchum would have made an amazing Macbeth. I believe that for sure. He plays such a huge part, not just in cinema, but in acting for me, because of that very simple method he did on every film. Just know your lines, show up on time, hit your marks, go home. I mean, that's honestly such great and relaxing advice, and takes a load off of building a character sometimes, where you don't have to overthink everything. He obviously was not a perfect human being, from what obviously has been reported, numerous affairs. Even while his wife Dorothy stayed married to him all throughout. He had many different episodes, many fights, many different issues. Of course, these were the old days. He was a wild card. Look at his upbringing, right? But when it came to him being an artist and telling a story, he held up a monumental mirror to nature for all of us to reflect and experience. Regardless of his imperfections, he still was a man for his family. He still cared very deeply for his family. And I respect that in the man. He really did appreciate art from the inside out. Many people haven't seen it, but I believe wholeheartedly that he was doing character breakdowns left and right. Even though he had such an amazing photographic memory, which, damn, I wish I had that. But Robert Mitchum will always be the bad boy with a poetic sensibility that will continue to inspire the progression of human storytelling. Show's over, folks. Now, tell me, did I miss anything? Please list in the comments. Please, ladies and gents, tell me, what are your favorite performances from this wild man of artistry, Mitchum? If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel if you would love to see more. If you do like this, go on now and click like. Ring that bell to stay updated on more content to come, which be prepared because there's going to be a lot coming out this month. I would love it very much if you guys follow me on Patreon. That way you can see more what I offer there versus here. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. Now, if you excuse me, I got $2,000 in my breast pocket that need a home, and I know just the place.